My wife's cheating came to light after her recent girls' trip, and karma seemed to deliver justice before I had the chance to act. I work night shifts while my wife works during the day. At her workplace, most of her colleagues are men, but there are also women in auxiliary roles, such as in the office or the spare parts department. We've been together since we were 17, and now in our 40s, we have children. I won't go into the specifics of our family life, but it's worth mentioning that she recently started this job, so workplace relationships are a relatively new experience for her. She has been spending more time with her female coworkers outside of work. Usually, she finishes work around 5 p.m., but doesn't come home until 7 or 8. On some occasions, she even stayed overnight at her coworkers' places after drinking. This behavior surprised me since she's normally responsible and avoids drinking in public. For now, I haven't been too worried. Last night, I was at home and not working, so I went to bed at my usual time. Around 3 a.m., I woke up because the glow from her phone screen caught my eye. I couldn't tell whether she was texting or browsing the internet, but since she wasn't trying to hide it, I thought it was probably harmless. However, she got up and started preparing for work, even though her shift didn't begin until 8. I asked her about it, and she agreed that it was early but said she was meeting her coworkers for a walk. She's a diesel engine repair mechanic, yet her appearance seemed much more dressed up than usual for a walk or a typical workday. She left around 4, likely arriving at her friend's place by 4:30. It was still dark, raining lightly, and about 45 degrees, hardly ideal conditions for a walk, especially in Arizona, where raincoats aren't commonly used. My wife drives a truck, and I drive a car. At 5 a.m., I texted her, asking if I could use the truck for a dump run, but she didn't reply. 15 minutes later, I called her, and she answered, saying they were still on their walk. She also told me I could pick up the truck from her workplace. If it hadn't been raining, I might have checked if her hair was wet, suspecting she might have taken a second shower. I tend to overanalyze situations due to my unique way of thinking, and sometimes struggle with interpreting social cues, so I wasn't sure if I was overthinking this scenario. Ultimately, I decided to confront her and ask to see her phone. She tried to redirect my focus by demanding to see my phone, which I handed over without hesitation. I have nothing to hide, as I barely have any personal time, let alone opportunities to meet others. When I checked her active messages, nothing appeared deleted, but a specific conversation I remembered seeing earlier had mysteriously vanished. This made me suspicious, so I called the person who had raised my concerns and asked to see his name in her contacts. I handed her the phone, telling her I wanted to review their text exchange. She acted innocent, but couldn't explain why she had messaged him before leaving the house, and again after returning, even though she claimed she had been in Vegas. Instead of providing an explanation, she acted confused, pretending not to understand why the messages were stored. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I decided to leave. I packed my belongings and informed her of my plans before departing. Let me share what I learned from the police investigator afterward regarding confrontations. He explained that individuals guilty of minor infractions rarely admit to the full extent of their wrongdoing. Even when they confess to one instance, they often withhold key details, especially in cases involving ongoing affairs. This means expecting a full confession is unrealistic. In situations where trust is broken, you may need to consider legal action or significant decisions. The investigator recommended starting confrontations by implying that you know more than you actually do, encouraging the guilty party to talk. He emphasized that the truth is the most valuable outcome, so don't reveal the limits of your knowledge. Instead, approach the situation like a high-stakes poker game and avoid showing your hand too early. He also noted that searching someone's phone may not yield much, as evidence is usually well hidden or deleted. Unless the person is careless, they will likely have already removed incriminating material. Your task is to highlight gaps in text messages and call logs to establish evidence. It's essential to obtain communication records from your telecom provider to identify periods where there's no contact, suggesting the person was with the other party in person. By making them believe you have more information than you do, you can encourage admissions, even if incomplete. During my confrontation, when I demanded her phone, she resisted and instead asked to see mine. Guilty people tend to focus on protecting their secrets rather than scrutinizing yours. My wife showed little interest in checking my messages or photos. Instead, she was more concerned with the phone in my hand as I casually scrolled through harmless conversations. She even said, "See, I don't know what you think I'm up to." Continuing my investigation, I entered the suspect's number into her phone and clicked the SMS icon. But there were no messages. Returning to the contact, I showed it to her and asked about the missing texts. She claimed they had never communicated. I challenged her, revealing that in the past month, they had exchanged over 900 messages. Under pressure, she finally admitted to deleting them, but claimed the conversations were about her wanting a divorce, something she wasn't ready to discuss. I avoided revealing too much of my suspicions, but provided enough details to make it clear I knew what was going on. Knowing the exact number of messages helped solidify my position and prove I wasn't bluffing. People caught in difficult situations often try to dodge responsibility using various tactics. They might provide vague or incomplete explanations, such as saying they were with friends without offering specific details. These accounts often fall apart under further scrutiny. Innocent spouses typically share vivid details about their activities, while guilty ones seem defensive or evasive. My wife's behavior aligned with these patterns. For instance, during a disagreement with our eldest daughter, she later admitted she deliberately tried to steer the conversation, anticipating that our daughter might come to me. Guilty individuals often make themselves the center of attention, hoping the focus will eventually shift away. Reflecting on the past, I now realize I should have asked my daughter why she reached that conclusion. I should have encouraged her to explain what led to that belief. Looking back, I regret not taking the initiative to call her myself and clarify things. It's worth considering how an innocent partner might act when accused. They would likely be eager to offer detailed explanations, even without being asked, because their conscience is clear. On the other hand, an innocent person might be irritated at the idea of showing their phone as they value privacy, but they would ultimately comply without significant resistance. They would likely feel genuine confusion rather than resort to dishonesty or evasive behavior. One critical point to remember is that the most convincing lies often mix truth with falsehoods. In my wife's case, she claimed she spent time alone at a tattoo parlor looking at sketches. However, when she came home, she didn't bring any sketches or pictures of them. Instead, she briefly mentioned the visit and showed me a few design ideas she found online. She said her appointment was at 1 p.m. but left the house at 11:30 a.m., making it only a 45-minute trip to the tattoo parlor. When she returned home, it was nearly 6 p.m. While I believe she did visit the parlor, I suspect she may have gone to his house beforehand. Perhaps they spent time together, and booking a tattoo session served as her alibi. They might have shared lunch and deep conversations about moral issues at his home before she came back. This prompted me to piece together what really happened. A simple alibi doesn't explain everything. For example, she mentioned heavy traffic but provided no specifics, like a blue Honda overturned. She also claimed she stopped by Home Depot to search for lifting belt rings but returned empty-handed, which suggests that trip wasn't successful. There were other details the investigator shared with me, but I can't recall all of them now. I'll share them as soon as I can. Meanwhile, she continues her relationship with him, and it seems unlikely that things will improve between us. I've come to terms with the fact that my own issues with anger contributed to her pulling away. I've been actively working on improving myself and have made significant progress. While she hasn't confessed to cheating, I am ready to forgive her, acknowledging my own role in the situation. She insists our relationship is beyond repair but has offered to cohabitate for the sake of the children. I worry that this offer stems from hidden fears. In response, I told her I was willing to pursue a divorce if that's what she truly wanted. However, since she hasn't mentioned divorce herself, I take it as a sign that she isn't ready to end things. There's even a possibility that she is softening her stance. Recently, we went out for dinner with the kids, and she seemed friendly and open. We had a warm conversation, and she maintained eye contact throughout. At the time, I thought perhaps the walls she had built around her heart were starting to come down. However, on the drive home, she made a subtle comment, almost as if reminding herself that she no longer loves me. It's often said that leaving a cheater should be simple, But when children are involved, the pain of betrayal cuts much deeper. My life has been so deeply intertwined with our shared existence that it's hard to let go. For those who see my actions as weakness, they are free to feel victorious. That said, this morning I woke up to find her gone. Even without knowing his exact location, I knew where she was. I know his address. Earlier, I had taken photos of her truck parked in his garage. I'm not sure why I felt compelled to do that. Perhaps to better understand her emotional state. When I arrived at his house, I initially only saw his car in the driveway. To my surprise, her truck was parked nearby as well. She didn't know I was there. At one point, she texted me asking if we needed any household supplies, like garbage bags. I responded that we were out of groceries and, using the moment, asked her to pick up some cream for me. Pretending to be confident about her location, I didn't react to the situation immediately. Soon, I saw him leave in his car, while her truck remained parked in reverse, suggesting they had gone somewhere together. I walked up to the door and prepared to ring the bell, but no one answered. Trying to open up communication, I messaged her and asked if she had received the letter I had mentioned. She replied that she hadn't seen it, so I shared its contents with her. She suggested we discuss it later. Then, she texted me claiming to be at Costco. I replied immediately, telling her I knew she wasn't there. About 45 minutes later, she sent me a photo of a familiar Costco building, clearly taken after she had arrived, and constructed her story. Not wanting to give in to manipulation, I asked her to send a picture of her truck if she expected me to believe her. She calmly responded that she didn't care about convincing me. At that moment, I realized she might have been trying to protect me from further pain, possibly even fearing my reaction. This made me feel regretful, but the constant lies were more painful than hearing the unvarnished truth. To prove her point, she later sent me a photo of herself inside a Costco store. Despite receiving this evidence, I chose not to reply, letting the weight of her dishonesty linger in silence. Internally, I was torn, reflecting on moments when my anger drove me to consider leaving her and our children. Although I am determined to avoid repeating such behavior, I now feel ready to explore a new path to free myself from this situation. Yesterday, I consulted with an attorney and discussed the circumstances in detail. Following my therapist's advice, I made a conscious decision not to act impulsively while my emotions were still heightened. Instead, I chose to take my time and think through all the options carefully. Right now, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I are still living in the same house for the sake of our children. This arrangement is far from easy, as I feel the financial weight of supporting the household while she continues her involvement with another man. To make matters worse, she has a separate group chat with our kids, which she uses to spread false information, such as claiming she was out drinking with a friend named Maria. One particular instance caught my attention when she claimed to have been out drinking at 4 a.m., just hours before her work shift was due to begin. Given that bars are typically closed at that time, it was clear her story didn't add up. What's even more concerning is the effect her lies are having on our youngest child, who is on the autism spectrum but highly functional. He often looks up specific details, like the operating hours of businesses such as bars and gyms, and has started to notice her inconsistencies. It's troubling to think that her unchecked dishonesty is now impacting our children as well. After several quiet nights, I reached a point where her behavior no longer kept me awake. I had already consulted with a lawyer who informed me that with shared custody, my alimony payments would be just $140 a month. My wife has made it clear she doesn't want to sell the family home, but it's obvious she doesn't have the means to buy me out or take over the property. According to my lawyer, however, if I decide to sell the house, it will have to be sold. This realization put me in a somewhat tricky position. My savings are significantly larger than hers, which puts my property at risk of being divided equally. However, I also have investments in company shares that haven't yet matured. The lawyer assured me that these assets could be protected because their status is still uncertain. He also suggested that I could use the house as a bargaining tool. If I contribute only half of the mortgage payments until our children turn 18 in 5 years, I could negotiate for an equal division of future assets while protecting my savings. Essentially, the situation has turned into a strategic real estate negotiation. On a personal level, I must admit that the stress from lack of sleep and overwhelming sadness led me to seek reconciliation with my unfaithful wife. At one point, I found myself desperately begging her for another chance, a moment I now see as deeply humiliating. About 2 weeks ago, I hit my breaking point and had to leave work early because I couldn't concentrate. When I got home, I hoped to see her car outside, imagining it might mean there was still a trace of affection left for me in her heart. Looking back, I now realize how important it is to maintain my dignity in such situations. I tried to have a conversation with her, but my efforts were pointless and I only felt more pathetic. My pleas were met with silence. That Sunday, I had no particular plans, so I told her I wouldn't be home until the start of the work week. This gave her the opportunity to spend time with the kids while I stayed away. After buying pizza for them, she left the house again. Feeling lost and unsure of how to occupy myself, I sat in my car browsing internet forums and getting distracted. For reasons I still don't fully understand, I downloaded Tinder and created a profile. Initially, I wasn't looking for anything serious and mindlessly swiped left on all the profiles I came across. Eventually, I started a conversation with one woman, though I wasn't particularly interested. The next morning, after finishing work, I saw another profile and impulsively swiped right. To my surprise, we matched instantly, and she greeted me with a warm message. "Hello, handsome." Her kind words couldn't have come at a better time. They lifted my spirits when I desperately needed encouragement. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. Before I knew it, we had agreed to meet for drinks, and Tuesday night turned into an impromptu date. As our connection grew, I felt it was only fair to be upfront about my current situation. Honesty is incredibly important to me when starting a new relationship. Interestingly, she had also experienced betrayal in her past and had been divorced for some time. She shared that she was ready to start dating again. At the end of the night, I walked her to her car and we shared a kiss. It's worth mentioning that my wife has already initiated divorce proceedings, so legally, we are no longer bound. The thought of this new woman and the possibility of building something hopeful brought me a sense of comfort I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a while, I was able to sleep peacefully. Perhaps in his infinite wisdom, God sent her to remind me that I am worthy of love and appreciation. Even if this relationship doesn't develop into something long-term, I am grateful for the happiness she brought me in the moment. While it might seem like things are moving quickly, it's important to understand that my marriage has been unstable for years. The idea of divorce has crossed my mind many times, but I never acted on it. I also have to admit that I didn't make any meaningful efforts to repair the relationship. My wife's affair was the final straw that led to our separation. Looking back, it seems that this outcome was inevitable. Neither of us was truly happy, but neither of us had the courage to initiate the breakup. As I reflect on the situation, I can't help but wonder whether I might have been tempted into infidelity if I were in her position. The thought of being unfaithful has always been a fear I've tried to avoid facing. Taking advice from my therapist, I made the deliberate decision not to rush into any choices while my emotions were running high. Instead, I chose to take my time, evaluate the situation carefully, and weigh my options thoroughly. Today marked an important step forward. I made an advanced payment to officially begin the divorce process. As a result, it's likely our current cohabitation arrangement will soon come to an end. My son and I have decided to find homes near each other and plan to become neighbors. At present, he refuses to communicate with his mother because of her infidelity. My intention is to sell our house and secure my rightful portion of the proceeds. While she opposes this plan, she doesn't have the financial means to cover the mortgage on her own or to buy me out with her share of the divorce settlement. Starting the divorce process has cost me $2,500, but despite the initial discomfort, I believe it will prove to be worthwhile in the end. Day trading has grown from a pastime into a skill I've become quite good at, and my earnings from it continue to rise. I aim to engage in larger trades as my experience grows. One personal aspiration I've had for a long time is to own a 1979 Fiat Spider convertible. As a married man, I could never justify the expense, as it seemed irresponsible. However, the situation has changed, and I no longer feel bound by those constraints. Once my life stabilizes, I plan to make that dream a reality. I've even discussed getting a custom license plate with my lawyer, featuring a quote from a song, "Damn, it's good to be a gangster." I can't help but imagine how my wife might react when she receives the divorce summons and realizes my intention to sell the house. It's ironic that we'll both walk away with enough money to start over, albeit in separate homes. She might choose to live with her partner while I focus on rebuilding my life. My wife, who has been unfaithful, is now in the process of returning her truck to the bank. Occasionally, she sends me casual text messages to start conversations. However, I've maintained a detached and non responsive approach, often choosing to ignore her attempts entirely. Recently, she messaged me about evaporative coolers at Home Depot, bringing back memories of a failed attempt to purchase one during a winter sale. She also asked when I'd be home, mentioned we'd be living in separate rooms, and even wished me a good time at the water park I plan to visit with our kids. On a side note, I've noticed that water parks seem to attract many single moms following a divorce. Earlier today, she texted me about her plan to rent a truck for $730 a month, which means our eldest child will lose access to a reliable vehicle. The one they've been using already has over 220,000 miles on it. I can't deny that seeing her face the consequences of her choices brings me some satisfaction. I also had a long conversation with my sister, who shared details about the man my wife is currently involved with. Apparently, he has been married and divorced 4 times. My sister mentioned he has a pattern of getting involved with women, draining their finances, and then disappearing from their lives. While this seems far-fetched, I told my sister that if it's true, I hope he takes advantage of my wife quickly so the divorce process can be completed without delay. I also said I hoped their relationship would last just long enough for me to finalize all legal matters and free myself from this situation. Interestingly, I recently had a discussion with my wife about this. She explained her plan to return the truck as part of a broader strategy to refinance the house. She admitted she's unable to cover both a cash payment for the truck and the new loan terms at the same time. This aligns with my own decision to move out, as I refuse to live in a home where she freely conducted her affair. I informed her of my plan to transfer ownership of the house to her, but made it clear I would require a buyout. To achieve this, she would need to give up certain liquid assets to compensate me for my share. Although the sum falls short of what I'd ideally like, the cost of leaving this chapter behind seems relatively small. I intend to resolve these matters while she remains cooperative. In my experience, physical and emotional distance often diminishes people's willingness to negotiate fairly over time. She expressed dissatisfaction at not receiving a portion of my liquid assets, but I reassured her she would have full control of the house. Whether she chooses to keep it until our children grow up or invite her boyfriend to live there is entirely up to her. That said, I remain vigilant and cautious as things progress. Tomorrow is a pivotal moment for me. I'm purchasing a new home and meeting with my lawyer to finalize the necessary legal documents. For those familiar with my story, my wife of 19 years had an affair, which I discovered back in March. At first, I made a desperate attempt to save the marriage by trying to win her back. However, after consulting with a psychologist, I came to understand that my life would be better without her. This led me to rent a house within walking distance of our current home, allowing our children to move freely between the two places. To make things more manageable, I adjusted my work schedule to simplify school pickups and drop-offs. The move is set for tomorrow, as I've already received the keys and arranged for utilities to be connected. Thankfully, I am financially stable and can afford this change. I've also arranged a meeting with my lawyer to process the divorce paperwork. My wife and I came to an agreement via email, which the lawyer will use as a framework for the legal documents. If everything goes smoothly, we'll sign the papers during the meeting and then wait out the required processing period. I expect the divorce to be finalized by late June or early July. Although the settlement may not be everything I hoped for, I know that prioritizing my mental health is worth it. Regarding my job, I still hold several restricted shares that will vest in the future. Fortunately, our agreement states that my wife waives any claims to these shares. Staying in my current role makes sense, as these shares are likely to be valuable. My employer has been highly supportive throughout this process, offering 30 days of leave and short-term disability benefits, which have strengthened my loyalty to the company. Fortunately, my wife has a well paying job that keeps her above the poverty line, meaning I am not required to pay spousal support. With equal custody rights and my responsibility for the children's medical, dental, and vision insurance, my alimony obligation is only $142 a month for less than 5 years. We're even discussing the possibility of waiving that payment entirely. Looking ahead, I feel optimistic about the next 5 years. When my children grow up, I plan to have saved enough to retire overseas by the age of 47, sparing myself from the need to continue working in the United States until I'm 70. Reflecting on my situation, I realized that feeling stuck in my marriage had led me to waste money on luxurious houses and unnecessary material possessions that ultimately held no real value for me. Oddly enough, living on the other side of the world from my soon to be ex wife has revealed an unexpected benefit. While the end of this relationship has undoubtedly left me heartbroken, I am determined not to let it define me or rob me of the ability to love again. I firmly believe there is someone out there who will earn my trust and love, even if it requires me to take the risk of being vulnerable. Love and hope are powerful forces that should never fade, even in the face of betrayal by someone you trusted. During moments like these, I find solace in a quote that resonates with me. However, we do not look back for long. We keep moving forward, opening new doors, and embracing new experiences. Our curiosity leads us down uncharted paths. This serves as a reminder not to spend too much time dwelling on the past, but to keep moving forward, exploring new opportunities, and embracing the unknown. I believe curiosity is the guiding light that leads us toward fresh and exciting journeys in life. Having made the decision to start over, I am now taking steps to achieve my goals. In just a few hours, I'll be leaving on a trip abroad. Since I've dedicated the month of July to self-discovery, I've planned a visit to Thailand. As I navigate life as a single person, reconnecting with aspects of myself that I had forgotten feels essential. I'm actively seeking out new experiences and adding them to my growing list. When my soon-to-be ex-wife sends me messages, I respond at my own pace, sometimes waiting several days before replying. While the divorce proceedings continue, I'm prioritizing my well-being and ensuring the process moves forward smoothly. The financial and property issues have already been resolved, leaving custody and alimony as the final matters to address. My lawyer strongly advised against accepting my wife's unreasonable custody proposal, which is unlikely to gain approval from any judge. Instead, we put forward our own plan. I emphasize that our children are now old enough to express their preferences regarding custody arrangements. Additionally, I secured a home within walking distance of my wife's residence to make it easier for the children to visit both households. Interestingly, after I moved out, she wasted no time relocating her lover into a new home. While this might have initially upset me, I now see it as almost laughable, a cliche even. As for my trip, I have to admit that I won't be traveling alone. I've started seeing someone new, and she'll be joining me. Ironically, my sleepless nights are no longer caused by the pain of my wife's infidelity, but by the 14-hour time difference. To anyone still facing these challenges, I offer simple advice: don't give up. Life will keep moving forward, and it's important to keep pace. After what felt like an endless ordeal, I am pleased to say my divorce is now finalized. To summarize, I made the difficult choice to leave my ex-wife after she began an affair, signaling the end of our marriage. While the custody and alimony arrangements weren't as favorable as I'd hoped, I was prepared for less than ideal results. I successfully negotiated an agreement with her to allocate half of the alimony payments toward our children's college savings. Since our kids are now teenagers, her suggestion that they alternate weekends between us seemed reasonable, as they are old enough to decide for themselves. There are only a few key matters left. The custody arrangement now requires my ex-wife to handle the children's school transportation. This allowed me to take a traveling position at work, enabling me to work around 15 hours of overtime each week to cover food and household expenses. Thankfully, this overtime doesn't affect the alimony calculation in our jurisdiction. Additionally, I updated my work insurance policy to exclude her as a beneficiary, resulting in additional savings. Interestingly, her employer-provided insurance may exceed the value of the alimony she receives, I recently learned that my ex-wife is dealing with health problems, including breast cysts, which have added to her struggles. While it might sound harsh, I can't help but find a sense of irony in the fact that these challenges followed her affair. I don't mean to sound cruel, but I believe in being honest about my feelings. In response, I made sure to update my life insurance policy so that she would no longer benefit from it. The other day, I saw her in person while I was providing financial support for one of our children's medical needs. Surprisingly, this interaction didn't stir any emotional reaction in me. I'm moving forward with my life, focusing on staying positive and cutting out negativity. To those who are just starting this difficult process, my advice is to hold on to hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and better days are ahead. I'll admit that in the beginning, I didn't handle things well. I begged her to come back, acted without confidence, and lost my composure. This led to me taking temporary leave from work and dealing with other challenges. However, I've since realized that survival is possible. It's not easy, but it can be done. It feels like karma is finally starting to take effect. I've always believed that people eventually face the consequences of their actions. Recently, I found out that my ex-wife was fired from her job, ironically, at the same workplace where she met her lover. This outcome feels fitting, considering her history of damaging previous marriages and engaging in inappropriate relationships with coworkers. It turns out she had two affairs, and her partner was also married. Later, I learned that she was diagnosed with breast cancer and is now undergoing treatment. After losing her job, she is struggling to make ends meet. I also discovered that her older lover convinced her to sell the house and then disappeared with the money. While the children tell me she is experiencing an emotional breakdown, I can't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She made her choices and must now face the results. As she continues to deal with the fallout of her decisions, I'm moving forward with my life and building a relationship with someone who truly values and loves me.